Hi there, it's Marzena. Few months ago, I made a little poll with 3 project ideas that were most frequently suggested by my viewers in my videos comment sections. I asked you which one would you like to see the most. You were probably thinking that I forgot about it, don't ya? Well, I didn't. So today, let's make the winner of the poll. Your most requested, the Moth Fairy. Let's dive in. For the base, I chose Frankenstein, and for the mandatory second pair of arms, I used one of the operetta's bodies left from my head shrinking tutorial. To prepare the doll, firstly I cut off her hair as close to the scalp as possible. Then I softened the vinyl head and the glue inside of it by dunking the doll in a boiling hot water. After a minute of soaking, I could remove the head from the neck pack and scrape the inside to remove all the remaining hair plugs and glue. When the doll was properly bald, I wiped her face off with the help of 100% acetone. Then our head was ready for the shrinking. If you are interested in that process, check out my head shrinking tutorial. It was time to make a big decision and pick a moth to base our girl on. So many beautiful moths out there. The choice wasn't easy. Some, like Luna moths or Rosy Maple, were a bit too brightly colored for my taste. Poodle moth was a bit too monochromatic and a bit too cute. Baphomet moth is as far as can be from cute. But the most interesting ones are the males, and I wanted to make a female doll. Clothes moths? Too boring. Those were very tempting, but I have made so many brown dolls recently that I had to say no this time. Skull moths? Very cool, but once again, too brownish. And then I stumbled upon this one. The ghostly silk moth. What a beauty! And those semi-translucent wings. The choice was made. I widened the neck hole and smoothed down its edges. Then I impaled our head on a pencil for a better grip, and I mixed some orange acrylic to paint the scalp before rerouting the hair. When the paint dried, I secured it under a layer of watered-down Mod Podge. When this dried, I prepared the hair from 100% acrylic yarn and I rerouted the entire head. Voila! I secured the new hair by pouring a good amount of tacky glue into the head, spreading it thoroughly with a Q-tip and leaving it for 2 to 3 days to cure. To reconnect our head with the body, I had to trim down the neck pack, slim down the neck, and heat up the head with the help of a hairdryer to make the vinyl squishy again. 'Cause shrunken heads are hard as plastic. But heated up, they temporarily regain their elasticity. I turned my girl into a cozy burrito. After that, I could give our girl a pair of some bombastic side eyes, aka a proper insect-like compound eyes. 'Cause you know that your girl can't draw huge eyes on her doll's face. Huge eyes are just not my style. So, just like with my hornet and wasp fairies, I sculpted those. I left the epoxy to cure, and after that I created the holes for her future antennas. I sprayed our head with 1 layer of grey primer and 3 layers of Mr. Super Clear UV Cut matte varnish. Finally, it was time for the face-up. Definitely my favorite part of the customization process. And the one that I really put a lot of effort into. There are as many face-up styles as there are customizers. Everyone has their way of drawing and stuff that they like or dislike. My face-ups consist of many layers sealed in between with MSC. I give my dolls a lot of shading with soft pastels, rarely keeping the original complexion of the doll showing from beneath. I love drawing the eyes smaller than majority of repainters. And I hate fake lashes on dolls, even though I always struggle with painting them with paints or pigments. And I really enjoy giving my dolls different facial expressions. They rarely look just straightforward. With this particular face, I wanted to give her an expression of deep awe, a fascination with eyes wide opened, and an ecstatic smile on her lips. Because that's what I think moths feel when they see a source of light. Ecstatic excitement. And this girl is seeing the light, and she will do anything to grasp it. I wanted to thank everybody who took their time to vote in the poll. Sorry to the Dragon and Dragonfly Fairy teams. The Moth Fairy won both on my Instagram and here on YouTube. Of course, before I posted the poll, I already had a basic design ready for each doll. And to be honest, I liked the Moth one the least. I really thought that the dragon would be the winner. So after the Moth Fairy won, I had to rework her design completely. I hope that I managed to come up with something fairly decent. You will be the judge of that at the end of the video. Hopefully, you will be content with both my design for this concept and my choice of the ghostly silk moth as a base. I know that a lot of people had their favorite moth in mind. Fingers crossed that not many of you will be disappointed. Fun facts about ghostly silk moths. First one, they can only be spotted on Madagascar, because they feed strictly on one type of vines that grows only there. The second one, those moths do not eat at all in their adult stage, ever. They have just few days of adult life, and they save their energy to only reproduce. How fun and tragic. Just few measly days, and the ghostly silk moths will turn into ghosts. And of course, I wouldn't be myself without adding a bunch of freckles and beauty marks. Frankenstein is one of my least favorite face molds from Monster High doll line, but somehow I am always happy with my repaints on her. I like how lit up her face looks here, and I like her brows. They kinda remind me of the Moth's antennas, so they suit her perfectly. I drew the lashes and they didn't fault me that much on this one. Added more highlights to the face and painted tiny catch lights in the eyes with white acrylic paint. The compound eyes also got their catch lights. And with that, the face-up was done. I am pretty happy with how she turned out. Comparing the sizes of the heads and the old and the new face. Pretty satisfying change. I wrapped the head in a plastic wrap to protect the new face, and let's the body modification started. I cut out the middle part of the torso first. Then I curved into the crotch, which sounds painful. Next, went the left knee joint, so it could bend more. Since she will be standing only on one leg, I had to make sure that it will be strong enough. I decided to strengthen it with some sort of stiff wire, so I cut off the leg in its weakest point, the knee. I sanded all the toes from her left foot. I also sanded down all the painted stitches, plastic seam lines, and sculpted on panties. And I smoothed out all the rough edges. I had to cut off her left arm and sand down the shoulder and the left boob, so I could resculpt it later with the arm raised up. Another thing to do was to straighten the neck. The overly protruding necks are my least favorite part of Monster High doll's design, but they're just a small inconvenience. I drilled the holes on the sides of the torso, aka the sockets for the additional arms. I extracted the arms from our generous donor and made sure that they would fit in their sockets. I smoothed the surfaces of all the pieces with sanding sponges and files, and finally I drilled the holes for the wire attachments. With a bigger drill, I started to carve a tunnel in the standing leg. And...
Co ja robię? Nie ta noga. Nie ta noga. Damn it.
Oops, wrong leg. Nothing to see here. We are all only humans. I drilled the tunnel in the right leg this time. The right leg. It wasn't the easiest task, and I ended up creating some unintentional holes, but most importantly, I managed to drill all the way through. I took a thick wire, and to make it way stronger, I put it into my drilling tool and twisted it tightly. I cut it to the desired length. I squeezed a piece of aluminium foil into the chest cavity. Then I put a piece of wire through the arm sockets, and I put the additional arms in place, temporarily. I also put a piece of aluminium foil in the pelvis part, so the hot glue won't spill through the gaps in the groins. Then I poured the glue inside and put a piece of twisted wire in. I connected the two torso pieces and built up the stomach part with more foil and hot glue. I also put the hot glue into the neck gap and used cold water on my fingertips to smooth everything out. Sculpting time! With epoxy sculpt, of course. First, the stomach, to permanently strengthen up this part. Then, the neck gap. I also made the neck itself a bit thicker to make the bulbous neck peg part a bit less of an eyesore. When the epoxy cured, I sanded down its surface to smooth out the epoxy to clay transitions. I could then glue the separated leg in place and go back to sculpting. I covered her hips and created a new pair of butt cheeks. I like sculpting butts, and I cannot lie. I covered the knee joint on the right leg and started creating the leg segments. I wanted them to be fluffy, but not too hairy, so I tried a little more subtle way of sculpting fur than I usually do. I finished the leg and let the epoxy cure, but I didn't like the shape of the foot with the remaining heel, so I sanded it off and curved the little segments with the milling cutter. Next, I sculpted the left lower leg, leaving it mobile for the time, for the sculpting's sake. And only when the lower leg was done, I glued the knee joint in place. I finished sculpting the leg and I let the epoxy cure. After that, I gave my sculpted parts a good sanding treatment. Exfoliation is crucial, I mean it. The smoother the transitions, the more spotless the finished doll will look. Nice ass, girl, but you need a second one. After all my insect fairies need to have a bug butt. I drilled a hole and prepared the wire. I bulked up the bug butt a bit with hot glue and aluminium foil, and I went back to sculpting. I looked up the abdomen of the ghostly silk moths and tried to replicate it. It looks very suspicious at this stage, but trust the process. With the bug butt done, the lower half of our girl was finished. It was time for the upper part. I put all the arms in proper position and I superglued the elbows and wrist joints. As for the shoulder connections, I only glued the upper right one in place. I left all three detached arms still removable. Easier to sculpt on them that way. Voila! All done. But I lost myself in sculpting a little bit, and I totally forgot about the direction I wanted to go with this project, and the main idea behind this design. See, I wanted this girl to be reaching for the light at any cost. I wanted her to be burned by the flame, yet still reaching, still fascinated. She's a moth. they do that, you know. I have few Bonita femur in my stock, all with broken necks, and her hand will be perfect for our burned arm. I just had to fix my mistake. I cut off the original hand, sanded down some of my sculpting, and drilled the new wrist socket hole. I glued in the new hand and roughed up the forearm a little bit. And all the arms were finally ready. I glued them in place and covered all the connections with epoxy. Time for a boob job. 4 arms, but her chest will stay classic. I sculpted the boobs while keeping in mind that with one arm raised up, one breast will have to be placed higher than the other. And with that, the sculpting on this doll was done. I let the last part of epoxy cure, and I gave my girl one last sanding treatment. And I could focus on the stand. I bought this artificial grave candle insert for our hauntingly dangerous fire source. With that, we only needed a candlestick. It was hard for me to find/make the base from wooden bricks that I have on my workshop. They were just too thick, and at the moment I don't own the proper tools to safely make them thinner. So I had to improvise, and I used 2 pieces from smaller wooden bar and some wooden coasters that came with the boxes I use whenever I have cables and batteries to hide in my stands, like the one from my vampire girl. I just had to glue everything together with wood glue. I clamped it together cause this particular glue likes to expand, and I left it for the night to cure. On the next day, I removed the clamps and I used a handsaw to give my base a little bit of retention for the clay to grab onto. Then I sprayed liquid Sculpey on the entire base. And covered it with sheets of Super Sculpey. I tried to make the stand as round as possible. It was still a little bit wonky though. I exposed a spot of wood in the middle so the clay wouldn't crack during drilling, and I baked my base in the oven. When the baked base cooled down, I sanded down its surface a little bit to make it a bit less wonky. You better do stuff like that in mask and protective goggles for your lungs and eyes safety. The base was done, my workspace clean, It was time to make a proper candlestick. I drilled a hole in the middle of the base and I glued a thick wire in it. Forgot to press record for this part. I made this S-shaped loop at the end of the wire. I wrapped the main wire with a thinner one for the retention. I covered the wires with aluminum foil to give the core more volume. Then spread liquid Sculpey on it, before covering the entire thing with clay. I need to think about a better camera setting for big pieces like that. Oh well. I ran out of grey Sculpey, so I switched to the nasty fleshy one. When the basic shape was done, I baked it and sanded it. I noticed a crack that appeared after baking when the clay refused to bond with the wood, so I fixed it. I switched the camera angle and I started adding the details. Making this candlestick was the hardest part of the project. I feel better and better at sculpting organic things, but man-made stuff still gives me a hard time. Designing the decorative details is not my strong side, and I was doing it here on the go. So it took way more time than I thought it would. I wanted it to be fancy, but not too much. Just interesting enough to be a nice element to look at, without really taking the spotlight from the moth. When I was happy with the candlestick, I added the wax. The drippings I made by covering the wire mesh with the clay before attaching it to the main piece. And ta-da! Not too bad, not too bad. I sprayed my baked candlestick with black primer and covered the metal parts with gold paint. I fixed the black on the wax parts and added a little bit of shadings with brown and black pastels. I covered everything with gloss varnish and glued a piece of EVA sheet to the bottom. To add a little bit of color, I decided to use this pretty rust effect paint to cover some parts of the metal with patina. I am still figuring out the best application method for this effect paint, but nonetheless, here it is, our finished doll stand. Time to go back to our girl. Before I started the paint job, I drilled holes in her back. For the wings, of course. I sprayed our fairy with grey and white primers and 3 layers of MSC. I like body blushing. Working with pan pastels is quite pleasant. Those are the best soft pastels I have ever worked with. For vibrant colors, they still need to be applied in many layers, but I don't mind. I like the effect of crazy colorful blushings on my dolls. And I know that many people who asked me to make a Moth Fairy will be disappointed that I didn't base mine on the one they had in mind, but I really am happy that I chose this one. Just look at those colors. Looks so royal. When the body was done, I removed the protective wrap from my girl's head and did the fixing on the neck. I sprayed her one last time with matte varnish, and after that I added a bit of sticky wetness to her poor hand. I also created tiny drops from UV resin as tears of pain in the other corners of her eyes and as a pearly sweat on her forehead and temples. Her mind might not notice how dangerous the flame is, but her body definitely does. I put gloss varnish on the compound eyes and on her lips, and this part was done. But she was still far from being finished. The hairstyling was the next step. I just trimmed her hair into a nice round fluffy shape. And then I destroyed it. Her hand couldn't be the only thing that got burned. Two elements left. Firstly, the antennas. I had this fake fern lying around, and I noticed that its top pieces look almost perfect for this part. I just needed to trim them a little bit, shape them, and paint them black. I fixed the paint with a layer of Mod Podge. I tried to tint it with black paint, but I remembered that Mod Podge cures transparent, so it was totally unnecessary. And here they are in their rightful place. I think this plastic fern turned out to be great antennas. So let's destroy one! 'Cause just like with the hair and the arm, the flame calls for sacrifices. I cut parts of the left antenna and painted the cutout tips to create the illusion of burning. Okay, I left the most important part for the last. Let's finally make the wings for our pretty moth. The wings of ghostly silk moths have this cool sheer look to them. So I made mine from Warbler Transpa art. Usually I use just resin for my fairy wings, but these ones were supposed to be way bigger than any fairy wings I've made before. I sealed the wires in each wing using a metal tool that I heated up with the heat gun. Unlike any other Warbler sheets, this particular thermoplastic is not really sticking to itself, but good amount of heat will seal everything. Of course, my damaging spree was not done and one of the wings pair had to be roughed up a little. For that, I used scissors and heated up poking tool. Time for the paint job. I used permanent markers and black acrylic paint to create the patterns similar to the ones that real ghostly silk moths have. Then I took my airbrush and I added transparent orange to the circles and black shadings at the edges of the wings. I followed the patterns here and there to blend it with the shadings a little bit. The smaller set of wings have this interesting shading on them, so I cut out a kind of stencil from a piece of paper, placed it on the wings, and airbrushed black on top. Our roughed up wings needed a bit more attention. I am still figuring out this glowing incandescent effect, so let's not be too judgy. Warbler Transpo art is quite flimsy, so I strengthen it with few layers of UV resin. You may know this technique from my previous videos. I developed it for my goldfish mermaid and also used it later on my jellyfish girl. As you can see, it also works pretty good on big fairy wings. Okay, the fun part. To give the wings the fluffiness that moths are well known for, I bought some flock effect for nail art. And I sprinkled it over one last layer of uncured resin. Then cured it under an UV lamp. It was an experiment, but it looks pretty cool. I only had to bring back some intensity to the colors. Once again, pan pastels did their job perfectly. I sealed the painted wing with a layer of matte varnish, and the job was done. Here's the finished wing. It looks nice and fluffy, and the best part is, it's quite scratch-proof. I couldn't be more proud of the end result, if I can say so myself. Those must be the prettiest wings that I have ever made. And look how perfectly ghostly translucent they are. I love this sheer look, just like on those beautiful moths that inspired this design. Finally, our girl could properly spread her wings. I glued them in her back with superglue and secured the connections with epoxy sculpt. When the epoxy cured, it was time for just one last detail. More fluff. I took the fake fur yarn and some wefts made from the leftover reroot hair, and I covered my fairy's chest, neck, and wing bases with fluffy fur worthy of a moth. After trimming it down, my Moth Fairy was finally complete. So, without further ado, let's put all the project pieces together. We have the candlestick, we have the candle, and we have our reckless fairy. And with that, I'm giving to you your most requested Moth Fairy figurine. As I said previously, from all the projects in the poll, I was the least confident about this one. But in my opinion, I managed to deliver. I think she looks very pretty. Even the candlestick turned out quite decent. And the wings. The wings are definitely my favorite part of this piece. I could sum up this project with one statement. Don't be the moth. Don't trust the flame, no matter how fascinating it looks. Okay, your turn. What do you think about my Moth Fairy? Did I manage to satisfy your need for moths? Or do you feel a little bit disappointed? I know that I am happy with my choice, but I also know that the competition for the ghostly silk moths was tough, to say the least. So bring it in. I love reading all your comments. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if so, give it a like and subscribe to my channel if you are not already. You can follow me on X or Instagram for more updates and sneak peeks, and you can also support me even more by buying me a virtual coffee at ko-fi.com. Also, I am sorry for my voice in this one. The air conditioning is killing my throat this summer. But that's it for today. Thank you guys for watching and see you soon!
Wszystkie dzieciaczki.